For my second day in Venice, I'd already pre-purchased and printed an entry ticket for the museums around San Marco, so my plans were pretty much already laid out. To get to San Marco, I could have just retraced my way from the day before, but I instead took a slightly different route to the Accademia, going past Chiesa San Patalon and Campo Santa Margherita, where incidentally I'd had a margherita pizza the previous evening. San Salute, as seen from the Ponte dell'Accademia in the hazy morning light. Venice, though of course somewhat dilapidated in her alleys and streets, looks absolutely amazing in the morning, and it was an enjoyable walk. The almost total lack of cars really speak to me. I don't think I've addressed the confetti that's on the streets practically everywhere. I noticed it even at the bus stop in Mestre on my way home. As I've said previously, this was right after Carnival. I guess they hadn't gotten to that part of the cleanup yet. Having spent a lot of time around other tourists, it's refreshing to see ordinary Italians being about their life. Well, ordinary as far as I could possibly know. I don't know who they are. They could be other tourists, but I didn't get those vibes. A most charming aspect of Venice is of course how the bridges sometimes bend and zigzag to fit between the buildings. Little space is wasted here. San Moise looks more imposing when you move towards it instead of away from it, with its great white marble facade and its questionably sculpted camels. Not particularly visible in this shot of photo, mind. You should Google them yourself. They look weird. Finally, I reached San Marco again. And I of course talked plenty about the Basilica last episode, but if there's any time you should admire it, it should be on a hazy morning like this. Most serene. The main subject of today's video is of course the Basilica's neighbor, the imposing Palace of the Doge, once the seat of power of Venice and her empire. Like many buildings in Venice, it's built in a Venetian Gothic style. It's a blend of Gothic that was so popular in Europe at the time, with Byzantine and Islamic influences. It in turn has influenced buildings all over the world. You might notice that two of the pillars are of a different color. It's not known fully why this is. Popular legend has it that death sentences were pronounced from between them. Or even that they're stained red by the blood of traitors. I entered smoothly through the fast pass entry and got into the palace courtyard. In the background, you can see the basilica, and to the right the Scala dei Giganti, the giant staircase, flanked by statues of Mars and Neptune. To enter the upper floors, all tourists were required to check in their backpacks. I was half afraid they would object to my filming as well, but that was fine apparently. Buongiorno. Oh, grazie. I almost walked into that guy. A few stairs up, I could admire the shadow cast by the roof over the brick walls and arcades of the courtyard. Quite aesthetic, if you ask me. Now, this curious figure is one of the Bocche dei Leoni, the lion's mouth. Most of them, but obviously not this one, depicted lions. Through its mouth, people could submit tips, accusations and suspicions to the Venetian government, to be reviewed by the Council of Ten. As an aside, this blinged up staircase is the Scala d'Oro, the Golden Stairs. At the pillars at its base are depicted Hercules and, pictured here, Atlas, carrying the heavens, sculpted by Tiziano Aspetti. The stairs were meant to impress any visitor. The frescoes are painted by Giambattista Franco, and the gold and stucco around them is by the sculptor Alessandro Vittoria. But as I said, the Bocche dei Leoni, their ominous presence and links to the Venetian Inquisition acquired them a grim reputation over the centuries. But the truth is that most of the completely anonymous accusations were disregarded unless there were serious reasons to believe them, and the ones that were signed by an informant were thoroughly investigated before any action was taken. False accusations were punishable, and the Ten sure knew how to punish someone. Directly above the stairs was the Hall of the Four Doors, currently under conservation, so only 2 doors were available. This is the Sala dell'Anticollegio, the antechamber to the full council. It's a waiting room. My dentist could take a few notes. The sculptures of the far side of the door are also by Alessandro Vittorio, and the paintings on either side of it are by Tintoretto, one of the Renaissance greats. Sala del Collegio, the chamber of the full college. This room ruled Venice. First, let's admire the ceiling, with paintings by Paolo Veronese. It's from this room the Doge presided with his councillors, who in turn oversaw the different parts of state. The full council consisted of the Savi, think Department for Foreign Affairs, including Venetian lands outside the city, and the Signoria, the leaders of the city itself, including the Doge. Venice's government was a confusing mishmash of different councils of varying numbers with different tasks. For all intents and purposes, I think it's fair to say that the full college can be considered the cabinet or executive branch. That's the part with the president or prime minister. This is the Senate chamber, Sala dei Pregadi. It's got some impressive timepieces, and like most chambers, is decked out in gold and dope paintings. The Senate was elected by the Grand Council, to whose rooms we'll get to later. There's a lot that can be said about, and indeed will be said in this episode about the Venetian government. It's a confusing tangle of councils and committees. It's paradoxical in a way. It's way more draconic to us and our 21st century sensibilities, but it was also not so draconic as Napoleon, Mark Twain and others in the 19th century would have it. It was both democratic and oligarchic, and its subjects were fairly treated. But if you got on the wrong side of the law or of morality, you could be disappeared into the prisons, or worse, tortured and publicly executed. For better or worse, the Republic survived for 1,000 years with not much change in how it was governed. I particularly like the throne. And again, check out that ceiling. After a small corridor with benches you may not sit on, we arrive in the hall of the Council of Ten, Venice's infamous little conniving puppet masters. The council consisted of 17 people, confusingly, the Doge and his 6 advisors, and the nominal 10 chosen on a one-year basis by the Senate and voted on by the Great Council. The 10 was formed as a response to the conspiracy of Baiamonte di Apollo, which I discussed in my first episode. I lucked out, and the sites I visited just happened to line up for a sequential multi-episode story. Now you may ask, what did they do? Well, they saw to Venice's state security and a safeguard against corruption, mainly trying to discover any conspiracy that might befall the Republic through the vast network of spies. From the Council of 10 were elected the Council of 3, the Inquisition, who were even more secretive and had even more indiscriminate powers. Quoting from Jan Morris's book, "The 10 would send you to the torture chamber, so the Venetians used to whisper, the 3 to your grave." After the rooms of the 10, we arrived at the armory, a vast collection of weapons and related memorabilia. You might notice a CX symbol on the walls. This signified that the Council of 10 were in charge of these rooms. A stare down from the armory is the Liago. The sun shone splendidly through its windows. In this room of the Quarantia Civil Vecchia, on display was the painting The Last Senate of the Republic of Venice by Emanuele Bresanin. It depicts an elderly senator descending the Scala dei Giganti after the last senate held at Napoleon's conquest. This giant fresco, painted by Guariento around 1365, is what remains of the decoration of the Great Council chamber from before the fire of 1577. It depicts paradise and was forgotten until it was discovered behind the painting that presently sits in its place, also depicting paradise. At the end of the Liago was the station for the restoration that was currently being done to the Hall of the Four Doors. though at the time unoccupied. This mesmerizingly huge room is the hall of the Great Council, one of the largest rooms in Europe, or so I'm told. It was here they crammed in every adult noble in Venice for matter of state. The paintings done by the usual Venetian go-tos like Tintoretto and Veronese look at you from every angle of the room, but the most eye-catching, being behind the Doge's throne, is Jacopo Tintoretto's painting of Paradise. At the top of the walls are also paintings of several Doges. One of them, as you can see at the back corner, is painted as covered in black cloth. That is Doge Marin Faliero, who attempted a coup in 1355. It did not end well for him. From the Great Council Hall, we get to the Scrutinio, a room originally designed to be an archive or library, but came to be used for elections instead. It is here I will just quote verbatim from Jan Morris's book about Venice, because just the election of a Doge was so convoluted by design to discourage corruption. The Doge was elected by his fellow members of the Great Council, the General Assembly of Aristocrats, but choosing him was a tortuous process. First, 9 members of the council were picked by lot to elect 40 electors, who had to be approved by a majority of at least 7. 12 of the 40 were chosen by lot to elect 25 more, again by a majority of 7. 9 of the 25 were chosen by lot to elect 45 by a majority of 7. 11 of the 45 were chosen by lot to elect another 41, and these 41, thus sifted in 4 stages from the entire Venetian aristocracy, had to elect a Doge by a majority of at least 25. A set of further rooms with religious paintings showing how, well, religious the Venetians were. Everybody remembers the part of the Bible where a Doge kneeled in front of Mary and Jesus and John the Baptist. And of course, Venice's favorite animal, the Lion of St. Mark. And finally, we reach the prisons, where I'll go into a bit of a tangent about one of the most fascinating people in this city's history, and it relates to prisons and the Ducal Palace. So my favorite prison story for Venice is that of Casanova's incarceration and escape. Now I should be clear, he was never looked up in the prisons I'm walking around now. When he passed the Bridge of Sighs, which I'm currently passing by the way, it was from these Prigioni Nuove to the Doge's Palace. And he didn't get to leave for over a year. The Palazzo, in fact, had several prisons. He got locked up in I Piombi, the leads, so called because they were just under the lead roofs of the Palazzo. His crime? You'd think it was because he was an libertine who at the time was literally having an affair with an atheist nun. It didn't help, I suppose. The Inquisition knew a lot of what was going on. No, what got him done in was the fact that on a tip from a jeweler/spy, he was discovered to be in the possession of books of magic, like the Key of Solomon. You see, basically since his first memory, magic had been a part of his life. He didn't seem to actually believe in it. He certainly took it lightly, making it up as he went along. For him, it was a source of income, a tool to defraud gullible people. As a youngish man, he happened upon a patrician who had a stroke. He ingratiated himself into his service, where he dropped magic tables to help cure the man, sending out the doctors. And Casanova had no great love for doctors. To be fair, they weren't the greatest in those days. This gave him ideas, and I suppose he got a hold of the books to give an air of legitimacy to his bullshitting. But the Inquisition liked it not. They arrested him, and without a trial, put him in the leads. Hoping it would only last a few months to scare him, time went on and he lost hope. A year later, he started planning his escape. With the aid of his fellow prisoners, one of whom was a monk that joined him in the escape, they broke through the roof, and from it got in through a window to the palace, Casanova nearly falling to his death on the ground, or worse, into the canals below. You wanna go back? I'm just kidding. From there, and a few broken doors later, they walked out into the Venetian dawn. Hailing a couple of gondoliers, they got to the mainland and escaped into Europe. Still, Casanova remained a proud Venetian. When he some time later got to meet the philosopher Voltaire, the latter asked him what he thought of Venice's government. Quote, "Thinking I must be very dissatisfied with it. I disappointed his expectations and attempted to demonstrate that there was no country in the world where one enjoyed greater freedom." Later, Voltaire got back to the subject, asking, "Are you Venetians free?" Casanova answered, "As free as one can be under an aristocratic government. The freedom we enjoy is not so great as that enjoyed in England, but we are happy. My detention, for example, was an act of cruel despotism, but as I had knowingly abused my freedom, at certain moments I found that they were right to have locked me up without observing the customary formalities." "In that case, nobody is free in Venice," Voltaire replied. "That may be, but you must admit that to be free, one need only believe it." I guess that sums it up neatly. They had some further replies to each other, but trailed away in their discussion. Of course, exit through the gift shop. It's here I bought the memoirs of Casanova I've just been quoting from. After a quick break, I enjoyed the last part of the palace. This cool-looking gondola makes me wish I had one. They're probably not too easy to get hold of in Sweden, and if I bought one here, I don't really know how I would get it home. In this final hall are a bunch of architectural details rescued from the palace in its many renovations. These 4 figures are another Venetian souvenir from Constantinople, like the horses I talked about in the last episode. I moved up to the next museum and the next episode through the arcades around San Marco, past the famous Café Florian. Outside Museo Correr, I had the joy of noticing that my printed ticket was gone. Is this a cliffhanger? Sure looks like it.